We avoid what we think we already understand. But sometimes the wall we've dismissed holds more than emptiness. It holds beauty we just stopped believing was still meant for us. I've said it more than once. Cities have never really felt like home to me. They're just too loud, too fast, too much motion and not enough room to breathe. The sky always seems a little bit too far away. The streets a little bit too full. Everything just seems to press inward instead of opening outward. And when I'm in places like that, I tend to emotionally withdraw even more than normal. I don't notice the details. I don't want to. I put my head down, I walk fast, and I just try to get through it. And I think we all do that sometimes. Not just with places, but with people, with seasons of life, with ourselves. When something doesn't feel like it belongs, or when we feel like we don't, we just detach. We assume there's no beauty to be found there. So we stop just looking altogether. We say it's survival. We say we're being efficient, but often it's a form of resignation. We give up on the possibility of being surprised. And that's what I did the last time I visited a city. I was on my way somewhere else. I didn't want to be there. So I moved through it like a shadow. But something unexpected happened. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. And it woke me up. Because sometimes it's not about seeing something new. It's about noticing what's been there all along. What we would have seen if we hadn't already decided there was nothing worth seeing. And maybe that's the real loss, when beauty just disappears. Maybe it's when we stop giving beauty a chance to be noticed at all. Where have you stopped paying attention? Not because it wasn't worth it, but because you decided too soon it wasn't for you. Chris never meant to photograph cities. His camera seemed to just be built for stillness. The dew-covered branches, the hush of early morning fog, the way light caught on a single pine cone in the woods. His portfolio, you could say, whispered rather than shouted. Nature, untouched and unhurried. That was his sanctuary. So, when a rerouted flight landed him in the heart of a downtown metropolis for 2 days, he didn't take it as an invitation. It felt more like a prison sentence. The city, with all its edges and engines, was just not for him. He checked into a small hotel near a busy street, unpacked only what he needed, and kept his camera zipped away. Instead of exploring, he found a small cafe near the corner and just sat there with a black coffee and a tired spirit. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through older photos, forest canopies, misty trails, a heron standing in the morning stillness. That was the world that he understood and he loved. This one, it just made him feel tired. But habits are persistent. And even in his frustration, his eyes eventually wandered. Just out of the window, across the street. There, on the side of a weathered brick building, he saw a mural. A woman's face, eyes closed, calm. The colors were soft blues and faded golds. Nothing loud or polished. It wasn't advertising anything. It didn't scream for attention. It was simply there, waiting. And something about it just paused him. And he stood up, walked outside, let the door of the cafe swing closed behind him. The coffee in his hand cooled as he stepped a little bit closer. And he raised up his phone without really deciding to. And click. That moment opened the door. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. And he wondered a little bit, then a little more. The city that had seemed so hostile now shimmered with small details. Light bouncing off cracked windshields, a child skipping over lines in the sidewalk, the sound of a saxophone spilling out from an alley, murals everywhere, cracks, ivy on the walls, rust, humanity. He didn't fall in love with the city by any means, but he didn't hate it anymore. And when he returned home, he created a new collection, his first ever without a single tree. It was titled The City I Never Saw. The caption underneath, sometimes it's not the world that changes, but the one behind the lens. What have you already decided not to see before you even gave it a chance to speak? Chris didn't uncover a hidden gem. The mural, it wasn't new. The street hadn't transformed. What changed, what made that day meaningful, was his willingness to stop assuming. He let something speak to him that he had already just dismissed. And that's where the real change begins. Not when something outside us shifts, but when our posture toward it softens. The city didn't stop being noisy or imperfect, but Chris stopped demanding it match his expectations before he would give it attention. He let go of the idea that something had to fit his ideals to be worth noticing. And that's the heart of emotional regulation, not forced gratitude, not a toxic positivity, just presence. Just giving something room to be seen before you label it. How many things in our lives have we written off simply because they didn't feel beautiful at first glance? People, places, even versions of ourselves that we carry tired narratives about what matters and what doesn't. This job can't be meaningful. The season is just a placeholder. I've already tried that and it didn't work. But often we're not seeing clearly. We're just seeing with fatigue. And fatigue tells us everything looks the same. Chris didn't discover a better city. He remembered how to pay attention. He remembered what it felt like to be touched by a moment that he didn't orchestrate. And that, more than any photograph he could take, was the real gift. When we allow ourselves to stop labeling and start listening, we begin to see life again. Not perfectly, not always joyfully, but honestly. And in that honesty, we remember that wonder isn't always loud. Sometimes it's painted on the side of a building that we've passed 100 times. But we have to be willing to stop and actually look. What story might be waiting behind the assumptions you've been carrying for way too long? We all have our version of that city. A space that we've grown tired of. It might be a place, a routine, a relationship, or even a part of ourselves. And without realizing it, we start moving through it on autopilot. Not with anger, not with rejection, just a quiet decision not to see it anymore. I've done that. I've passed through whole seasons of my life that felt flat and colorless, not because they lacked value, but because I stopped giving them any presence. I assumed there was nothing worth discovering there, so I disengaged before they ever had a chance to offer anything. And that's the danger of emotional fatigue. It narrows your focus and convinces you that numbness equals truth. But just because something doesn't stir your heart at first glance doesn't mean it's empty. Sometimes we've just stopped showing up with open eyes. I remember walking the same sidewalk every day and not noticing the little patch of moss growing between two stones until the morning after a hard rain. I must have passed by it a dozen times, but something in that day, something about the way the light hit it, the way it glowed, the way it lit up against the gray, stopped me. It wasn't stunning, it wasn't dramatic, but it reminded me I was still capable of just noticing. Chris didn't set out to change. He just looked up. And maybe that's all it takes sometimes. Not a plan, not a breakthrough, just a soft glance at what we've been avoiding. And maybe if we look again, we'll see something different. Not because the world changed, but because we're finally willing to just let it meet us. When was the last time you truly looked at something that you've grown used to and saw it again for the first time? This isn't saying or meaning to hide behind how you feel. It means making space to feel without becoming swallowed by it. It means gently holding your reactions, your resistance, your exhaustion, and asking, what's underneath this? We often think we need to be inspired before we can be present. But what if presence came first? What if being available to that moment without editing or judging it was the key to seeing clearly? Chris didn't change the city at all. He changed the way he entered it. He allowed himself to see something new. Not because he felt better, but because he stopped needing to feel a certain way before he allowed himself to engage. And that's the invitation here. Not to force ourselves to love everything we've been avoiding, but to stop assuming it's unworthy of our attention. We don't need to manufacture awe. We just need to stop blocking it. And that's what emotional regulation makes possible. It's not about suppressing discomfort. It's about walking through life with enough awareness to recognize when we've shut down, and enough gentleness to start again. When you regulate your emotions, you slow the loop that keeps you just stuck. You open the window just enough to let in a breeze. You say, okay, I'm here. This isn't what I hoped for, but I'm willing to notice it anyway. You stop needing your life to sparkle in order to be present with it. You stop needing every moment to reward you with meaning before you agree to participate. There's something special in that kind of softness. We think healing means feeling better, but often it begins by feeling more without judgment. And that takes courage, but it also creates the conditions for wonder to return. The wall in Chris's story never asked to be special. It was just waiting to be seen. And maybe the moment you're in, however ordinary, however gray, is doing the same thing. So look again, not to force joy, not to extract meaning, just to bear witness. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is stay in the frame long enough to let the colors reveal themselves. What part of your life might be healing right now? Not by changing, but simply by being seen with a little more patience. We all live with invisible frames, outlines around what we expect, what we believe and assume. Some are inherited, some are built through pain, some we construct just to survive. But all of them shape what we see. We don't always realize it, but our perception of reality is filtered through these frames. If your frame says this is a waste, then beauty might knock and you won't answer the door. If your frame says this always ends badly, then even kindness will look suspicious. Chris didn't need a new lens. He needed to shift the frame slightly, softly, enough to let something different come into view. And what he saw wasn't magical. It was just honest. A face painted on a wall. A quiet moment. A glimpse of something he didn't expect. And that's the turning point for a lot of us. Not a radical reinvention. Not a sudden flood of hope. Just a breath. A pause. A new angle. You don't have to reframe your whole life today. But what if you shifted the corner just a little bit? What if instead of saying this is nothing, you said, I wonder what I'm missing here? Curiosity softens what fear hardens. And grace often enters through the smallest opening. And maybe your life feels unremarkable right now, but maybe the relationship is just strained. Or the work feels stale. The routine feels heavy. But what if you stopped asking, when will this be over? And started asking, what's still growing here? Not because you owe the moment anything, but because you're still here. And you're worth showing up for. You're not alone. I see you. That tired version of you who keeps showing up, even when you're not sure what for. That counts. That matters. Your ability to even listen to something like this means your heart hasn't fully shut down. And that's a beginning. Maybe the wall you've been avoiding is still just a wall, but maybe it's also a story or a question or a hand reaching out toward you. Grace rarely shouts, but it doesn't stop showing up. So even if you don't feel ready, what if you looked again? What if the thing you've dismissed holds the next quiet piece of your healing? Not because it's perfect, not because it's new, but because you're finally seeing it as it is. And maybe it's just seeing you too. What frame are you living within right now? And is it still serving the way you want to see? Not every wall will be a mural. Not every season will turn beautiful just because we choose to stay in it. But the practice of seeing, the decision to look again, that's a kind of bravery. It's a willingness to let the present speak for itself without demanding it be extraordinary. The invitation today isn't to transform your life. It's to soften your gaze, to remember that value isn't always visible on the surface. But sometimes grace hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment to allow us to lower our guard just enough to notice. So we pause, step back, breathe. Look at the part of your life you've grown indifferent to. The sidewalk you always walk without thinking. The version of yourself you stopped cheering for. The place you swore had nothing left to offer. And ask, not is this good, but what's here I've been too tired to see. Because when the light shifts, even a forgotten wall can glow. So what's something you can choose to see differently, starting today? And remember, while it may not always be who we are, it can be about who we want to be. Thank you so much for watching.